And we're back. We're going to do book reviews real quick on this episode. So I'm just going to have short fronts, ins, and outs, and then I'm going to clip them up so that they're all on the web. But this live stream is going to be where they're recorded. So we're going back to, let's see, October of 2017. Do I want to do these dry? I don't want to do them dry. But I may end up having to do them dry. It would be cool to be able to put the books right here. All right, well, doesn't matter. I think we do them dry. Yeah, we're doing them dry. Manhattan Beach by Jennifer Egan. This is from October of 2017. I'd never read a single word of Jennifer Egan's work until Manhattan Beach, released by Scribner this month. Despite that, Egan has published 4 previous novels and won the Pulitzer and a National Book Critics Award for A Visit from the Goon Squad, 2010. A novel that has been acclaimed in effusive terms for its inventiveness and originality in all quarters of the literary community. Everything I read about Goon Squad makes it seem like my type of book. Weird, futuristic, made-up languages, character POV shifting chapters. I don't know how I missed it. Trust me, it's on deck. Though I'm late to the party, I think it might give me a different perspective on Manhattan Beach. I read it as a straightforward third-person novel set in the mid-20th century. Nearly all the early reviews of this novel mention how different it is from Jennifer Egan's previous work, and in specific, often quite vociferously, from Goon Squad. For an author who has been exploratory and inventive with form, Manhattan Beach is a contrast, a historical period piece. But it turns out Egan worked on this novel considerably longer than any others. She told Alexandra Schwartz in a long-form interview for The New Yorker last week she had been working on it for at least 15 years, struggling to put together a story, quote, anybody is going to want to read, close quote. I recommend it. Manhattan Beach is an extremely well-researched and fast-paced story set predominantly in Brooklyn near the end of World War II that transports the reader to New York City in the mid-1940s and fills it with presence and character. Egan has crafted an intriguing family story with which to reveal the city and the times, with particular focus on life in and around the Brooklyn naval yards. The protagonists, Anna Kerrigan and her father Eddie, and their family, friends, colleagues, and enemies carve out their lives cast in the meager circumstances of a wartime economy that we know from history is coming to a close. Manhattan Beach takes us on a richly detailed tour of the corruption and culture of Brooklyn, New York, the mafia and the Navy in a very particular period in history, the handful of years before the end of the war between Pearl Harbor and the fateful flight of the Enola Gay. It's an American story about a Brooklyn family and how their life is changed in a tumult. The war hangs at a distance, and we see the city, and in particular the Navy Yard and its surroundings, as most young, able-bodied Americans are being sent abroad to fight. Anna is a tremendously likable character, and her journey at the Navy Yard to become a diver is a fascinating and well-detailed arc that weaves through the mystery and intrigue of her father's disappearance and the nefarious underworld of the gangster Dexter Styles. Egan's style is crisp, well-researched, and yet poetic when necessary. Balanced in approach, one doesn't get a nostalgic feeling for this period. But rather a view of it, as if through a veil. The story unfolds, characters slowly discover things, and we get to see something we haven't been able to see. The sea, riding upon it, staying alive in it, walking in diver's gear, and trying to see through it plays a significant role in this work, and yet it, like the war in the distance, functions more as a powerful medium for the development of the characters. By contrast, the plumbing of Egan's characters, their thoughts and emotions buffeted about by war, crime, and sea change, is lucid and clear. Egan is excellent at interior monologues and reflection by her characters. She gets at rooted feelings with wide open eyes. This often results in gorgeous passages. The story includes a brilliantly imagined voyage on a merchant marine vessel named the Elizabeth Seaman. The nod to Nellie Bly goes unmentioned, a subtlety at which Egan is graceful, letting history fall into place where it belongs. Egan captures the longing and isolation of Eddie Kerrigan in his stateroom 47 days at sea, suddenly gripped by the notion that he has forgotten the face of his beloved. Quote, could hardly picture her anymore. Faraway things became theoretical, then imaginary, then hard to imagine. They ceased to exist. Close quote. Then, almost immediately, a torrent of thoughts pour through him about the first time they met, about her children and their times together, and finally he concludes, quote, it was all still there, everything he'd left behind. Its vanishing had been only a trick, close quote. The story here of a child and father separated by fateful decisions who alternate between avoiding and seeking one another out is woven expertly and filled with surprises that emerge, unfolding until events feel inevitable. That's good storytelling. The characters have a weight and realness to them because they endure and grow. There are deaths and children and gangsters and action. But the story takes place in a different America, a different New York, and it's glaring on occasion. Characters deliberate over ethically conservative matters with earnestness, but it never escalates. How women are perceived, how abortions and unwanted children are handled, these matters are described, but never raise up into full-blown issues. Racial hierarchies are described with the vernacular of the day, mix, wops, and Negroes, but racism never emerges enough to be addressed as an issue. It's just how things were, is the feeling one gets. Manhattan Beach faithfully portrays some Brooklynites, in particular Irish American, Italian American, and naval families during World War II, and an era of transition from a more sexist, racist, and somewhat naive past, just up to the doorstep of a future we live in today. I review without spoilers, so I'll conclude by saying Manhattan Beach is a great book. New Yorkers will love it, and Egan will be helped during awards season by that. But more, I enjoyed Jennifer Egan's language, lovely turns of phrase, and her characters' introspections. She has managed to create a compelling tale from immense research. 3 out of 5 stars. And that was 8 minutes. This is going to work great. Thanks for bearing with me. I'm going to read these book reviews and then cut them into chunks to put up later. Jennifer Egan just finished. I can't do the... That's going to have to wait. The 3-body problem. I wrote 3 reviews of the 3 books of the 3-body problem. I'm not going to record that right now. That's a little too much. I already did the Tawada books. How about The Terranauts by T.C. Boyle? The Terranauts by T.C. Boyle, I believe, is 2016, perhaps 2017. T.C. Boyle, The Terranauts, 2017. This was written on April 24th. I'm a creative person who is the children of scientists, who is the children. Oh, man. The Terranauts by T.C. Boyle. This is from April 24th of 2017. I'm a creative person who is the child of scientists. My father was one of the greatest sulfur chemists of the 20th century, and my mother was a physics and pharmacology educator and researcher for decades. Art and music and writing is my genetic code, while my environmental education and upbringing was always one of deep and proper science. The latter influenced me to be rational and theoretical and to question and wonder about our world, my life. The former to be social and to feel the world, to dance and to get high. So perhaps I'm biased in my reading of Boyle's particularly incisive view of the scientists who are the main characters of The Terranauts. But let me tell you, it's great. It takes a lot of sensitivity and prosaic power to get inside the hearts and minds of people locked up together in an intense project, a collaborative effort of scale, or a prison, and express that faithfully. You really have to go through experiences like that, or understand how working together happens in a deep way to attempt something like this. You have to understand people socially and personally. T.C. Boyle does. In The Terranauts, Boyle has invented an immense human project, populated it with entirely believable characters, and embarked on a plumbing of their emotional and physical landscape with such brilliant detail, I find myself taken aback at the effort and his skill pulling it off. His description of the technology of the Terranauts' sealed glass home in the desert is so vivid in detail down to the workings of the structure itself, and including the flora and fauna, in some instances even described with Latin nomenclature in such a way as to feel beautiful, that I had to remind myself this place does not exist, his biodome that he's invented. The pleasure I got from the contemplation of plants, animals, and weather inside by his characters is distinctly due to Boyle's sensitivity, rooted in research, and built with great prose. His descriptions of the emotional aspects of the scientists' relationships to their subjects as well as to their co-workers is equally nuanced, but even bolder. The comfort Boyle has developed in delving into human sexuality here reveals an honest portrayal of our superficiality more than our capacity for love. But it isn't cold. Science is calculating. Yet there is so much of that capacity for love displayed in the love of a scientific subject, or for the idea of team, or for loyalty as a badge of love. Even the subtleties of friendship and the complicated feelings that tie people together are handled exceptionally here. This is a faithful portrayal of the emotional landscape of men and women put together for 2 years, separated from us all, and Boyle has created a believable continuum that speaks to everyone about how we act. Jealousy, lust, envy, competitiveness, anger, love, longing. It's humans under glass. T.C. Boyle gets us. His characters over the years are always like people I know or meet along the way. Here he throws 4 men and 4 women together, separated by only inches from a half dozen of their friends, colleagues, and lovers for 2 years, solely for the purpose of expressing intimacy. It's an incredible conceit, seen vividly through. Employing the style of first-person chapters collected together to do the telling works because of Boyle's talent for briskness of plot. Though I don't generally love the format, here it lets Boyle expand inner monologue, the guts of people's feelings in confession post facto, as scientists would, really as anyone would. Confessing after the fact, telling the truth, and letting it out feels so good. It's a really cool way to unreveal the true story of the Terranauts. The arrangement of these chapters and points of view is beautiful construction. The first-person chapters are woven in a way of telling the tale that seems complete, unfettered, whole, and it happens progressively. It doesn't take long to feel a part of this ecosystem, and once you're in, you're equally concerned as the characters as to whether the goats are getting fed or whether there are any tilapia left. You're equally worried about the O2 levels. The characters are genuine, believable, and confessing their relatable flaws, they're likable. Those who seem initially like obnoxious foes or nemeses go through transitions and humanize, while the flaws of protagonists are openly dissected and brought down to earth. My emotions changed towards characters, and so I felt a part of the immense human enterprise, like I was on the team, in the dome, or at mission control, not some dopey tourist staring through the glass on my way to the Grand Canyon. Brilliant. In retrospect, the archetypal quality of the characters is resonant. The details make Boyle's ecosystem a deeply human environment of our typical longings, lusts, and desires met and unmet. The way we see each other in constrained circumstances relates clearly to how we behave in society, and Boyle uses an incredible palette of language to achieve this. I could feel the soil of the ecosphere between my toes. I wanted to hug Linda hard. And I guess typically for me, I felt kinship with Vaj and Linda and Gretchen. I thoroughly recommend the Terranauts to anyone with brains and a heart, or for that matter, a penis or a vagina. Way to go, TC. 3.5 out of 5 stars. And this also has a postscript, a word on T.C. Boyle's utter coolness. T. Corrigan Boyle is truly a social writer. I don't mean socially conscious or socialist, or that he seeks to influence or corral a group of readers in some direct manner. I mean he's a social being and an excellent writer. His socialness is apparent on Twitter, where I have enjoyed daily images of his routines, the morning, the egg, the paper, the rat, and of his various voyages. But recently I became one of the many readers and followers to whom he has replied. I was reading his novel Talk Talk from 2006 and tweeted some friends about it, including his handle, and what? At TC Boyle dipped into the thread to comment. Turns out he's totally personable on Twitter and comfortable discussing his work in detail. There's more about his tweets in my review of Talk Talk. So last week when I picked up his latest novel, The Terranauts, I tweeted to tell him I was starting it, and he responded. It was crazy. You can see the exchanges at MTKSF. His openness and ease daily with his readers or the public or whatever Twitter followers are strikes me as pretty unusual for a novelist of his stature. I mean, he's just so cool. After 15 novels and dozens of short stories and collections, a bibliography of 25 plus works, numerous national awards. The guy is a prolific American man of letters. He still takes time to hang out with his Twitter followers. Blows my mind. Though I shouldn't be surprised. The one time I met him, pre-Twitter in 2004 at KPFK in Los Angeles, he was totally present and easygoing. He works at his discipline, he teaches it, and is unself-conscious enough to engage with his readers as a regular person. I can only conclude T.C. Boyle is as great a guy to hang out with as his novels are. And by the way, his new book is the one I'm really excited about. He's on tour in Germany right now, signing, but we're waiting on the new book. I'm not going to... No spoilers. Okay, now this is my book review of Lincoln in the Bardo. So this one I do have the book. Let me grab it. Okay, so George Saunders, man, wow, one of the biggest writers of our time right now, certainly. The early millennium. George Saunders, a Texan, moved out there to Syracuse and now writing in New York and Jersey there in that community. Many interesting short stories, and then this, the so-called first novel, Lincoln in the Bardo. And this is my review of Lincoln in the Bardo. The originality of the structure of Lincoln in the Bardo immediately sets George Saunders' debut novel apart. It is composed of stacked lists of quotations. I don't know if you can see that. So it's composed of stacked lists of quotations attributed to the souls occupying Oak Hills Cemetery in the Georgetown section of our nation's capital in 1862. To the president at the time, Abraham Lincoln, and to his son Willie, recently deceased, and to the watchman and manager of the cemetery, neighbors, historical figures, and eyewitnesses to the events of the time. Quotes from these people after they're dead in a cemetery. I plunged into this work thinking these crazy quotes would continue for a few pages and then return to a normal third or first person narrative. Not only did they not, the form became its own sort of thing with hilarity and piety. The quotations interact, finish one another's sentiments. Saunders' approach from his short stories in Pastoralia, where letters and notes and faxes between characters move plot and create conflicts, is here in fuller effect. This debut novel thus actually resides somewhere between the novella and the form of long fiction, almost as if Saunders still isn't ready to write one of those novel things. It was initially off-putting because pretty quickly quotes from real historical sources reside in equanimity with a tumbling invention of the thoughts of the dead. The first time several quotations are used to describe the same person, and there are wide disparities implying unreliable reportage, forcing the reader to flip back and forth to separate quotes from actual historical texts from made-up ones. It's a hilarious reminder that we're in a novel, and it doesn't matter. Fiction and nonfiction swim together in Lincoln in the Bardo. In the mid-90s, in San Francisco, it was the fashion among serious, young, read unpublished writers like me to read the postmodern fiction of structuralists like Harry Matthews, the only American member of the Oulipo, with great love. The Ouvroir de littérature potentielle bears consideration in advance of talking about Saunders as a constructionist. There is confidence and ease, a confidence and ease I love about George Saunders. He really is in command of his craft. With this form, within a few chapters, you are in his world. If a person were to come over to you and look over your shoulder while you're reading this novel, it would look to them like insane gibberish. Saunders' effort is totally original, but like Matthews and the Oulipo before him, uses structure to train you into his narrative, isolating you from being able to tell his book. It was immediately apparent in an audiobook of this It was immediately apparent an audio book of this work is basically impossible without dozens of actors and a unique method for attribution audibly. It's another thing, a book. Parenthetically, they ended up doing that, and they hired like tons of big names in order to try to pull it off. I wonder how the e-versions read. Once aboard, the form establishes a rhythm and momentum that sends this richly imagined exploration of death. Once aboard, the form establishes a rhythm and momentum that sends this richly imagined exploration of death, life, and loss forward with vigor. The historical facts surrounding the 16th president and the death of his son at the White House and the Civil War that raged with the nation's history in the balance are the nest in which Saunders crafts a reimagining of purgatory. He does so to examine our sense of purpose and meaning in life and after death. But rather than a staid, dusty exploration of our historical understanding of the deaths of the time, Saunders populates his work with real people, everyday people who lived and died normal and unextraordinary lives filled with sins and loves and hates and pettiness. It is part of his charm in the short form that his characters are easily believable and admirable for their flawed, utterly human qualities. They are our guides to the mind of our beloved Lincoln and nation. Saunders' exceptional understanding of people and compassion for their desires, dreams, and regrets is again on display as this diverse collection of souls from many walks of life reveal themselves and the stories of their lives. The population of the cemetery includes slaves, but the book fails to really plunge into the national sin. I read a review that felt the opposite, that the recrimination and oppression of the slaves in the cemetery by the whites was clear-cut and evocative, giving voice to the horror, but it was disappointing to me. As I reflect on the role the slaves do play, it is once again as from a position of rectitude, to be able to look back at slavery and racism to contain it in the national narrative. There are some serious and violent points of intersection between the black and white population of the cemetery, and one particularly poignant one never ends: an eternal struggle. But I can't help but feel this could have been developed. Slaves and masters in the same cemetery, with only the masters in marked graves, seems a rare territory and an opportunity to explore racism more deeply. The conceit does fruit into a tangential reference into Lincoln's conclusions on the matter, conclusions that led to years of bloody war over ending slavery. This book isn't about that, though, nor about the Civil War. It seems to be about how we, all of us, think of ourselves and our lives more than Lincoln or anyone else in 1862 does. It seems to be about how we think of our lives in advance of and even after death, whether it's the death of someone we know or ourselves. In that, Lincoln in the Bardo succeeds with sensitivity and compassion. Saunders understands unrequite, failure, desperation, and the longing we all feel. He also knows how to craft this understanding into an incredibly direct narrative. It's amazing. Apparently, he has said about his process that the narrative tells him how long it is to be, what it is to be. In this case, it became something wondrous. I am left with so much after this novel. I find I cannot describe it very well. It's like a magician's deception. What you find within is worth much more than the conceit. It is clear, though, the magician knows his audience inside and out. Oh, this is going so well. I can cut all these up and make them singles. Let's see what's next. The Accident by Ismail Kadare. This is a good one. The Accident by Ismail Kadare. I have always been a romantic, despite the cruel human stupidity deteriorating this world. I have seen and read and loved a lot, and come to know the pain of it and of cynicism. I have come to appreciate Dorothy Parker and Bob Dylan. I have fought to resist the patina of the produced and to stare long in pursuit of a realistic understanding. Yet, I have always believed and fight still to believe in beauty, nature, goodness, harmony, and love. I am not yet completely jaded. Hence, I remain a romantic. Even now, despite my age, I look upon a woman I find attractive from a distance and, knowing nothing about her, still think, what if we're perfect for each other in some way? 50 years of living on this earth has dampened my spirits and broken my heart, but not ultimately my belief in the possibility of love. But when people ask me what I want to write about, I've given the same response for decades. My interest is literary fiction about real relationships and people. I like the ability of a great writer to honestly capture what goes on between people in states of profound intimacy as effectively as the interior dialogue within them. And the truth is, little of the best of this writing is romantic. The best is, at turns, cynical, petty, harsh, and loving in ways that seem impossible to describe until someone does. I would give Kawabata as my first and greatest example. Then perhaps Kundera. You could add Hanif Qureshi to that list. And now yet another K name, Ismail Kadare. Accidenti by Ismail Kadare was written in Tirana, Albania in 2008 and translated into English as The Accident in 2010. It is a haunting exploration of love, lust, and desire wrapped into the puzzling investigation of a car crash. From this seemingly simple conceit, Kadare weaves the pieced together tale of two lovers composed of the evidence and actualities that surrounded them. Untrustworthy depositions mingle with contradictory ones, and the use of language amazes and delights as the story tumbles along, revealing unrequitedness, jealousy, and the power game of love. The first time I ever heard of Kadare was on a flight returning from Maine to New York City in August of 1999. I had taken a sailing trip up the coast of Maine for 9 days with two close friends, and I used the opportunity to read Tolstoy's War and Peace for the first time. On the flight home, I had my tray table down and my journal out as I was making notes on the text. I pulled out the Tolstoy to copy some notes from it, and the man seated next to me noticed it. "Ah, Tolstoy," he said, and as I turned to him, he covered one of his eyes with one palm, stared at me through the other, and exclaimed, "Kutuzov." It was an instantaneous connection over the scenes in War and Peace in which the one-eyed General Kutuzov is approached by the foot soldier who has come to ask for orders, only to hear from the wizened general that it doesn't matter what they do, that the orders, like the battle itself, are irrelevant. The man seated next to me had a bushy mustache, thick black hair, and a slight Eastern European accent. He could have been Russian, but was more likely Czech or Hungarian, or perhaps from one of the former Yugoslav republics, which were then in the throes of separation and even dissolution. The man put his hand down, looked at me, and then asked seriously, "Have you read Kadare?" When I shook my head no, he continued, "You must. He is the greatest living writer," which is how I began my exploration of this Albanian, who has since won the inaugural International Man Booker Prize and is perennially a candidate for the Literature Nobel. The Accident is first and foremost a puzzle of an investigation, but the story is about retroactively composing the last weeks of two lovers, Mr. Besfort Y and Rovina, tossed from a taxi that, quote, veered off the airport Autobahn at kilometer marker 17, close quote. Kadare effortlessly moves between third and first person accounts in chapters that take off in different directions, leaving the reader to catch up. But once you do, he delivers a deep understanding of human emotions, expressed directly. He is clever and precise in his method of setting you up to grasp what he is trying to say about us and the way we love or treat one another. I had to flip back several times to remember things and put things together, but rather than being a nuisance or distracting, it became charming, as though I too were involved in this elaborate investigation and as if I might be the one who ultimately sees the truth. Kadare doesn't insult the reader. It's so great. He hups the reader to stay abreast, hiding important facts of the case in everyday accounts, only to have them remembered later and tossed and turned all about. The puzzling elements are crisp and Borgesian, while the emotional landscape of this relationship and its satellites of love are raw, detailed, and exceptionally written. There is so much feeling in the human relationships, described nakedly and with stark eloquence, that I found myself thinking once again, how much is lost to me by being in the United States? The relationships in our books are so narrow and empty of emotional range. More and more, it is because we are becoming flat and superficial. Americans on dates talk about TV shows, movies, stuff, and money. We are fast becoming the kingdom of porn stars and prudes, working in concert to confuse a society increasingly incapable of understanding true love or what meaning is. Ismail Kadare's love story, or lust story, or death story, or whatever this is much more full than even real everyday loves in the United States. An incredible book. I am glad Bob Dylan won the 2017 Nobel, but I must say I am increasingly with the crowd favoring Carteret to win it soon. That's what I wrote in 2017. Can I do one more? It's tiring, but it's good because I'm going to cut these up, which is going to be great. Then I can have them all up there. Oh, man. No, I'm going to wait on these others. All right, that was fun. Thank you.